Within 1 kilometer from where you are sitting right now, anywhere in this country, someone is being lured into human trafficking. Human trafficking, it's happening here in Canada, and it's happening to our own citizens. Individuals who are trafficked here in Canada, over 90% of them are born here in Canada. We've all experienced different things in life. We've all had different upbringings. We've all had different childhoods. But the one connecting piece that we all have is we all share the same emotions. We all know what it feels like to be scared. We all know what it feels like to be angry, to feel shamed. That's what we all have in common. So even though they've come from different life experiences, we all know what that feels like.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm your host, Andy Carlson, and today, Tim and I are honored to be joined by Katelyn Campbell, the Program Director at the Joy Smith Foundation, Canada's leading authority on human trafficking, prevention, and survivor support. The Joy Smith Foundation has helped over 7,000 survivors and their families restore their lives. Through education, collaboration, and healing, their work empowers Canadians to stay safe from exploitation and abuse. In today's conversation, we'll begin with Katelyn's personal story and what brought her to this work. We'll then explore some of the warning signs of trafficking, how to prevent it, and how to get involved. Katelyn, we're so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
And so we always like to get started with the human side. And so we're hoping that you could begin just by sharing your own personal story, maybe talk about your own childhood, and then what ended up bringing you into this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in general, I would say I had a really, really great childhood. I had loving parents. It was just me and my brother, so small family. Overall, it was a really good childhood. I was a very active kid. I loved playing sports. That was a big part of my life. But it was interesting because for me, I didn't really realize much of the impact that my childhood had on me until my older years, until a few years ago, actually, when I embarked on taking the Tim Fletcher program. Just working with the foundation, we wanted to collaborate. And so part of that was, well, let's have you go through the program and see what it's like and what you can learn. So I did. And it's funny because kind of looking back now, I think I was very naive going into it and just thinking, I'm not going to get anything out of this. It's just, I'm here to learn so I can help other people. That was where my mindset was going into it. And I think within the first 2 days, I've quickly realized, like, buckle up, this is going to be a long one. Because I think oftentimes when you grow up and you have a relatively good childhood, when you have, loving parents and a roof over your head and food in your tummy. And, I grew up and we were able to go on family vacations. We had the money to do that. I was able to play sports at a high level. We had money to do that. So I think from anyone's perspective, I was very blessed. And so, yeah, I didn't really think there was much impacting me. But once I took that program, I realized I was very wrong. And there was a lot there that we unpacked throughout the program and was a really big reason why I think I got into the work that I'm doing now with the foundation. So that was kind of interesting. So I'll go back a little bit and just one of the biggest things I realized when I was a kid was I was bullied a lot for anything and everything under the sun. I'm quite tall. I'm 6 feet tall, and I've pretty well been this height since grade 7, grade 8. I grew really quickly, really early on. I developed really quickly early on. So when I was kind of in and around my friends at school, I looked a lot older. I didn't quite fit in. So yeah, I was quite tall. I was into sports, and at the time, everyone in and around me was more into dance and ballet. And I think as a girl, you're taught you're petite, you should be quiet, you should be little to fit in. And I didn't fit that mold. Um, I was not a small kid. I would say I was probably a little bit overweight, but nothing crazy. Looking back, I look back on photos of myself and I just remember at the time thinking I was so overweight. And then I look back on photos of myself and I'm like, oh, I really wasn't. Like, it was very interesting to recognize the mindset that you had at that point in time. And then when you look back on it, you realize just how wrong it was. So yeah, I was bullied a lot growing up for my height, for my weight. The weight was definitely a big one. I think the first time I can recall when I think it was in grade 2 or grade 3, one of my best friends at school came up to me on the playground one day and just told me, she was like, you know what, Katelyn, you're fat there. Like I said it, you're fat. And so at the time with this little kid, like grade 2, grade 3, what are you, 6, 7, 8 years old? That was my first moment in my life where I became aware of the body that I was living in. So up until that point, I don't really think I had understanding much of bodies look different. I mean, I knew that to some capacity, but when you're a child, you're very young, you're very naive, you're not looking to those characteristics that I think we do as adults. You're not aware of it. So that was the first time I became aware of the body that I was living in. And from that point, she was kind of very vocal with others around me in the classroom about just my weight and me being fat. And people would make jokes all the time about, oh, you must eat a lot of Big Macs, like dumb things that kids just come up with in their own minds, but really impacted me. And I remember coming home and telling my mom about it. And, I had a lot of support at home from my parents just with what I was going through at school. I think it was a big reason why I was able to kind of process it at the time as best as I could. And just recognizing that a lot of the times people will hurt other people because they're maybe insecure within themselves, or maybe they have something going on at home. So they come to school and maybe lash out. So yeah, I knew to some level that it wasn't a personal thing. But at the same time, I think when you're 7, 8 years old, it's really hard not to internalize that. So I definitely did. And I think that was kind of the starting point for me in, frankly, like a lifelong battle with body image and weight and relationships with food. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And growing up, so that was grade 2, grade 3. And then the bullying continued all the way until grade 8. And at that point, I just decided that I wanted to switch schools. So here in where I'm from, a lot of the schools are K to 8, and then you switch to high school for grades 9 to 12. So that seemed like a very doable transition for me. So instead of going to the school that was in my catchment, I ended up going and switching to a different high school just because I wanted to get away from that circle of people. They were really weighing on me. There was a lot of bullying throughout the years, and I was just really struggling, and I almost wanted a fresh start. I wanted a new circle of people that I could be around. Looking back, I realize that bullying, and this is part of what I learned throughout my time with the Tim Fletcher program, but that bullying really led me to crave love and attention. That need for validation was incredibly deep. And so I think because of that, as I grew older, I started to learn that if I morph into the people that other people want me to be, then maybe they will like me. So I think it caused me to wear a lot of different hats. And I think I went through a period of time where I didn't really know who I was. I didn't really know what I liked to do. Like, who was Katelyn? because I was so focused on who can I become so that this person that's standing in front of me will like me? Who do they want me to be? It definitely turned me into a people pleaser. I am still probably one of the biggest people pleasers to this day, and I think in a lot of ways that's a good thing, and I am trying to utilize the positive aspects of being a people pleaser to help others. But I also recognize throughout my life that it kind of got me into a lot of just trouble and maybe some unwanted situations. And I also kind of became the peacekeeper. So if people were struggling, could I make them laugh? If people were angry, could I bring them back down and be that one to comfort them so they had someone there for them? Like in every aspect of my life, I was looking for ways to validate other people so that they could look to me and be like, oh, wow, she's really great. I want to be friends with her, because my friends growing up weren't that for me. So that was a very interesting dynamic. So going into high school and switching schools, I think that was a big transition for me, but definitely not one I struggled with. I was really excited to get into a new school, be with new people. I actually really loved my high school experience. I know that a lot of people can't say that, but I think it was one of the places where I felt like, okay, I have a new start. There's new people around me. And I think because we were maybe a little bit older, more mature, I mean, as mature as you can be in high school, but I think because of that, there was less of the bullying going on in my circumstance. And the school that I went to really had a great sports program. And so because I played sports, I played volleyball and basketball mainly, I was validated for being good at that sport because those were two big sports in the school. So, yeah, I think in that regard, it was a really good experience for me. I know that's definitely not the case for everybody. But yeah, it was through high school that I started playing sports more competitively, playing on the provincial teams and training lots over the summers. And that was really where I started to think, okay, maybe I can play in university. Maybe I can take this a little bit further. Again, looking back, I think because of what I had experienced as a kid and now I was getting validated through the sports, I dove all in to being the best that I could be. Getting that validation and that need for acceptance was really important because it was something that was lacking through my friendships, and this was a place that I was getting it. So I was definitely an overachiever. I think in terms of being a perfectionist when it came to sports, I was always trying to find ways to be better. How could I get the most out of myself on the court? How could I best support my team? It was always kind of running in the back of my mind. It basically took over my life for those 4 years, just always wanting to improve and get better. And so a lot of that for me actually, again, tied back to food. Because with the provincial teams and the teams that we were playing on, they oftentimes brought in different nutritionists or sports therapists, different people to help us become the best athletes that we could be. How can we best perform on the court? Well, that started off the court. Things like, are you getting enough sleep? What is your recovery like? Are you doing ice baths? Are you getting your massages? And then what are you eating? What are you fueling your body with? So then I almost went the opposite way with food, with that. And just that was the one thing that I had control over. So how can I best fuel my body so that I'm performing my best? And I think it kind of led to very toxic views around food. And it was kind of almost one extreme to the other, where I really dove into just food, but I think I wasn't doing it in a healthy way. I think I was restricting, but I thought I was eating really healthy, but at that time, what healthy was isn't, I think, what actual healthy eating is. So I started restricting food and just, I wanted to become the best that I could be, truthfully. And in my mind at that time, honestly, it was, how can I become thinner? Like, how can I be thinner so I can be faster, so I can be a stronger athlete? And I know that's very twisted thinking, because in order to grow muscles, you need to be able to eat and be fueling your bodies with the proper calories, but I was very severely restricting calories just because that's what I thought I needed to do at the time. So food has kind of always been that underlying thing for me. And then after, in grade 12, I ended up, the last game of the season, I had a really terrible injury. I ended up partially tearing my Achilles tendon, fractured my foot, and so Achilles is a very bad injury to deal with. It takes a very long time to heal. So when that happened during the last game, I think there was this sense of knowing, okay, you're probably not going to continue playing because this is just going to be a really long road to recovery. So that kind of shifted things for me, as well as at that point, I had actually received a lot of concussions throughout sports over the years. So I think leaving high school, I had already had 4 or 5 concussions. And so I don't necessarily know if that played an impact. I'm sure it did, just on my overall health and well-being and struggles with mental health. But yeah, that was definitely part of what I had gone through in high school. And so when that injury kind of happened, I started shifting gears towards, okay, well, now what? Because I think up until that point, I was just so focused on basketball and volleyball that I didn't really have an idea for what did I want to do in life. And I also really didn't know who I was outside of sport and basketball, volleyball. So it was a very confusing time for me. And I think that left me a little bit more susceptible to meeting my ex-boyfriend, who was a very abusive, toxic person for me in my life. But it was kind of the perfect storm. I had met this guy and he was just Prince Charming. I mean, for what I thought Prince Charming was at 18 years old, he fit the bill. He treated me so well. He was so kind. He did everything for me. Looking back, I think it was definitely a case of some love bombing going on, because he just kind of swooped in there, was telling me everything that I wanted to hear. Um, he was buying me gifts. He was doing all these things for me. And I just thought, wow, how did I get so lucky? Because at this point in time, I didn't think I was lovable. Like, I was still working from this place of, you're not you're not beautiful, you're too big, you're too fat. You know, kids would tell me, you're never going to get married, you're never going to have a boyfriend, like you're ugly, you're fat, all these things. So when somebody actually came and was showing interest in me, I think it was hook, line, and sinker. Like, the second that this person came into my life, I was all in. So yeah, it started out really well, as most relationships do. And then slowly over time, things started to shift for me with him. He became incredibly manipulative. He just, in little things, but things you don't really realize looking back, are maybe something that you should be questioning a little bit more. So at this point, I had started university and drove me to class every single day. He would pick me up from class every single day. Um, if I had practice, he would drive me to practice. He would pick me up from practice. He always needed to know my whereabouts and what I was doing. If I wasn't studying or if I wasn't at practice, he wanted me to be with him, and I would be led to be guilted for not wanting to go be with him. If I wanted to go home and just have a night to myself, that was a problem. Like, I couldn't go and do those things. He would make me feel bad for wanting my own time. And so at the time, I think I was kind of telling myself, well, it's because he really loves you. He just wants to be with you. And this is something you've always wanted. So, okay, like it's not that big of a deal. Looking back, I know, of course, now that those are some red flags. When someone's always, wanting to kind of control your time and know your whereabouts, those are things to be aware of. But for me, it was kind of like, okay, well, he's paying attention to me. So that's great. So little things like that. And then over time as well, he just started kind of manipulating the way I saw myself. He knew that I had been bullied and I had struggled with my weight and body image. So it was very subtle, but it was things like, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't be eating that. If you want to be performing at your best, maybe you shouldn't be eating that. And then that slowly kind of turned into, at the end of the relationship, he would tell me that I wasn't beautiful, that this was the best that I was ever going to get. He was going to be the only one that could take care of me. And he was only doing these things and acting this way because he loved me. He was a very angry person. So oftentimes these would come out in very strong outbursts of emotion and anger. And so, yeah, I felt very controlled. I felt, again, like I didn't know who I was. I think because I thought he loved me, I was just trying to do everything I could to keep him happy because he was such an angry person. So that was very challenging. And at that time of my life, like he had broken me down so much to the point where I truly didn't feel like I could do any better. I didn't have any self-worth. I had just, kind of lost this relationship with sports that I had. I didn't know who I was. So it was very confusing for me. And I think it led to a lot of confusion and just, I didn't know what the path forward was. But he was a constant in my life who was showing interest in me. So I was like, okay, well, I just got to do whatever I can to keep him happy. So I did. Again, that people pleasing kind of came out. And it was such a roller coaster of emotions every single day. It was to the point where I didn't always know who I was going to get when he would walk through the door. So it was kind of like you're walking on pins and needles throughout the entire day. And it was to the point where I could tell just by the way he opened the door that I knew who was walking through that door, if we were going to have a good night or if we were going to have a bad night. So I kind of became very hypersensitive to him and his emotions. And I think I was always kind of like that, but this really increased that hypersensitivity to other people around me and their emotions. So yeah, it was very manipulative, emotionally, mentally abusive. It never got to the point of physical abuse, but that was kind of the shifting point when I noticed that it was becoming physical. For me, for some reason, that was my wake-up call that I needed to get out. I think deep down I was already kind of like, okay, this isn't unhealthy, this isn't good, but I think I will do anything I can in my power to help somebody. I thought maybe I could fix him. So that's what I was doing. So I stayed in that relationship. There was not one single day that I didn't leave that relationship feeling horrible about myself. I remember every single day I would, on the drive home, just bawl my eyes out for months. Like, I don't think there was a day where I wasn't driving home crying. And so because of the hypersensitivity and awareness to his emotions, that's kind of when I started really struggling with my own mental health, and it caused me a lot of anxiety. So I remember the first time I ever had a panic attack was with him, and I can't quite remember what had happened beforehand, but I remember having the panic attack and just being like, what just happened? I had no idea at this point what it was. I didn't really know that they were a thing. Anxiety wasn't really something that was talked a whole lot about around me at this point of my life, so this was all very new to me. Yeah, I went through that. I kind of started doing some research into, okay, well, what was this? What just happened? Kind of stumbled upon, okay, maybe it was a panic attack. I mean, maybe it wasn't, but that was kind of the only thing that was kind of making sense to me at the time. But I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, okay, that was weird. It was a one-off. Until the relationship was progressing and it was slowly getting worse and worse, that I was having panic attacks every single day, sometimes twice a day. Again, those months where I would just drive home crying, I was having panic attacks every single day, sometimes in his presence, sometimes outside of his presence. But I felt trapped. I didn't know what to do. I felt so stuck in that this was just going to be my life. I was going to have to deal with this abuse, and I didn't know how to get out. I didn't really know who to turn to or who to ask for help. There was a little bit of shame there, just in that, the relationship wasn't working out. And because I thought that no one really was ever going to love me, I was never going to have a relationship, I thought I had to make this work, because I genuinely think at that time I thought that this was the only person that was ever going to see me and think, wow, she's beautiful. Wow, I want to be with this person. So I did everything I could. But yeah, the panic attacks were getting worse and worse, and I knew I needed to get help. So that's when I reached out and started looking for a therapist to help me manage what was going on. And it was interesting because looking back, I think I don't really know what drove me to being like, you need help. But I'm so glad I did, because like I have spent over 10 years with her, and even to this day still have little check-ins with her, even if it's once a month or every few months, just like, hey, how's it going? What's new? But it was super helpful for me at the time. It was to the point where, throughout our relationship, there was different kind of pressure points, but one of the pressure points, and I think was kind of the shift that started the path down looking and realizing I needed help with my mental health, was I actually had a friend who I grew up playing basketball with. She took her own life. And so I remember finding out I was at university, and I had texted my boyfriend at the time and just said, can you come pick me up? Just found out some really sad news. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through the rest of the day. I just want to go home. So he came and picked me up, and I could tell immediately as I saw him driving up, he was pissed. I had no idea why. He didn't know at this point what had happened, but he knew that I was upset and I wanted to go home. And so I get in and I just start crying in the car. I broke down. Hearing about this had really, really bothered me, and I was really sad. So I was just crying in the car, and he didn't start driving. And I just remember looking over at him. He just had this like anger on his face. And I looked at him and I said, do you not want to know what happened? Do you not do you not care why I'm upset? And he's like, well, it doesn't matter. And I just remember thinking, well, it does matter. And I just said, my friend just died. She took her own life. And I don't know how I'm feeling right now, but like, this is really not okay. Like, I'm really sad. And he was like, well, you just need to get over it. He was like, it's not that big of a deal. And I just remember in that moment feeling so much anger, because I don't know what was going on in his mind before, if he had gone through something. But at that point, when I felt like I needed the support the most, I was not getting it. So yeah, that was kind of the turning point for me to realize this is unhealthy, but it kind of made me spiral a little bit. And I have looked into it a little bit, and what I now know is that sometimes when there is a suicide that happens, sometimes that can lead to other people in that community or in that circle, in that group, to also take their own life, almost like a chain reaction. Well, if they did it, then I can do it. And so, yeah, I was really struggling at this time with my mental health, with the relationship, with not knowing who I was. I didn't think life was going to get any better than this. So I started to wonder, well, maybe I should take my own life too. And that kind of caused me to spiral quite a bit and just thinking, if this is the best that love gets to be, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I want it. My parents at the time did not know what was going on. They did not know the severity. I think I really tried to hide it from them and most people in my life, because I think growing up and kind of having those perfectionistic tendencies, I didn't want other people to think anything was wrong in my life. I was always trying to portray this very happy person who had it all together, who would care for others and make other people feel good about themselves, because I knew what it was like not to feel loved and not to feel good about myself. So no one really knew that I was struggling to that point. But yeah, I really started thinking about, okay, well, I don't think I can do this anymore. I didn't love myself. I didn't think I was lovable at that point. Like when you get to that place in your life where you don't think there's a way forward, you almost just think like that's the only option. That's the only way out. And oftentimes, and I know for myself, this is how I felt, but I was like, I'm actually going to be doing people a favor by taking my own life. It's going to be making their life easier because I'm such a burden. I must be such a horrible person that these people are angry at me. They don't love me. They don't think highly of me. So I was like, people are probably going to be happy if I'm not here. And that was genuinely how I felt. And I know that's a very common thing. So yeah, I struggled with that. I did think about, okay, how would I do it? What would that look like? Who would I want to find me? Like, you think about all those things, because even in that moment I was like, well, I don't want to cause any other people stress. So like, how do I do this the best way possible? And so yeah, I was thinking about all those things, but there was something in me that was like, go get help. Go get the help. Just go talk to somebody. Let's see if that will do any good.
How long did that go on?
That thinking.
Yeah.
Timelines are hard. I think that really deep spot was about 3 months, I would say, um, of just kind of thinking and contemplating how was I going to do it. I wanted to reach out for help, but I didn't know how or where to go. So there was about 3 months where I was in a really dark hole, didn't see the way out. And then I would say, though, for probably a year or two, even after I started getting that help, I would definitely fall back into those thoughts. It was never as deep or dark as that first initial spot was, but it was definitely something for a few years that I had thought about and considered and kept kind of coming back to. So yeah, it was a few years for me. I know for some people it can be a lot longer, and it's one of those things where when you have that internal voice in your head telling you that people are going to be happy, it's just going to make people's lives easier, you're like, well, why wouldn't I do that? I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get the help. We'll see, though. In the back of my mind, I hadn't made up my mind in terms of like, well, I'm not still going to do it. It was just like, well, this is kind of my last option that I have. I didn't know if medication at the time was the answer. At that time, medication was still fairly new in terms, I mean, at least for me, I was never really exposed to people taking medication for anxiety and depression. So it wasn't really a thought that I had, like, oh, maybe I should, go and maybe get some help medically for that. But I was just like, I'm going to go to this therapist, see what happens. And I truly believe that, I mean, she always says, Katelyn, you're the one that did the work, but I tell her all the time, like, you were a guardian angel that was sent to me because I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for you and the help and the support that she gave me. She truly will always hold such an incredible place in my heart. She's an amazing woman. So, yeah, I think it was a long road, but she really helped me to understand the deeper roots to some of the things, but ultimately she just kind of became a safe place for me, somebody that I could talk to about what was going on and not fear judgment or anything else that came with, this is what I'm thinking about, because I was scared to tell my parents. I don't think I told my parents till I was like mid 20s even. I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want anyone to think that there was anything wrong with me, because I already thought the world saw so many other things that were wrong with me. So I didn't want to add to that. But yeah, so she helped me and I was able to kind of realize how abusive that relationship was, and it never got physical towards me, but I had been going to see her for a little bit, and there was one night where he had come home, and I think he was angry over dinner. I think he had come home and I hadn't made a plan for dinner or something like that. I didn't know. I was busy studying at the time. Dinner wasn't even a thought in my mind, but he had come home and, yeah, basically got really mad at me for not having dinner ready. And at that point, he came over, like he kind of charged at me almost and just took a swing. And he ended up punching a hole in the wall right next to my head, so right next to me. And at that point, I thought he was about to punch me. Like I was kind of bracing for impact, and nothing at this point had ever been physical with him, but it just happened so quickly. And I don't know what it was that caused him to punch the wall and not my face. I really don't. But that was my wake up call. He had picked me up that day because he was always picking me up and driving me around, and I did not feel safe or comfortable getting in a car with him. So I called his mom. She wasn't there at the time. And I just said, I need you to take me home. I had told her what had happened in the car ride, but I told him, you're not getting in with me. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. And so she drove me home. And, he had tried reaching out a few times. I'm so sorry. I love you. It'll never happen again. And I believed it. I thought that, yeah, okay, it was just a mistake. He was like, we can go to counseling. Like, I'm going to go to counseling. I know you're getting help. Let's get help. Let's fix this relationship. And looking back, I'm like, we were so young. Like, what was I thinking? That was insane. But I was like, yeah, okay, anything to fix it, anything to make this better. So we went. He found a counselor, and I went with him for one of his sessions. And I don't know. I think just for me at that point, after that physical altercation, I just decided, you know what? No, like this isn't for me. And I just ended the relationship pretty quickly after that. So yeah, that was kind of a crazy time in my life, so to speak, when I look back, like just how much was going on. But I was definitely still struggling with my mental health when that ended, and still struggling with not loving myself, not really knowing who I was or what I wanted to do. I was in university at the time, but I didn't quite have a clear path on what I wanted to take. So I was just kind of taking courses that I thought would be interesting, but I didn't declare my degree until a few years into university because I didn't really quite know. But eventually I really started to figure out I loved psychology. I loved learning about the brain. I loved sociology and criminology. So that was kind of the direction I started taking. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll be a police officer. That was kind of the thought that I had. I had an uncle who was a police officer. My grandma was an MP. So there was a lot of just work around social justice and all that. So that was what I thought was going to kind of be my fit. And yeah, I was going down that line, but eventually I was like, I don't think I have the personality to be a street cop. Like, I have a lot of respect for people who do it, but I do not think that would fit who I am well at all. So, yeah, decided to kind of withdraw my application, and I graduated with my degree, but still really wasn't sure. I graduated with my degree in psychology and criminology, but I was like, okay, well, where does that lead you? Like, it's not like if you're going to school to be a teacher, at the end of school, you're going to be a teacher. It was kind of like there's so many options, and I didn't quite know, but I knew I wanted to start exploring, so I started volunteering at the foundation at this point. My grandmother had started the Joy Smith Foundation for quite quite a few years previous to this. So I started volunteering, and it was one of those things where once I got into it, once I saw what was happening, it wasn't something I could ever walk away from. So that is in a very long-winded explanation of some of my childhood and how it kind of all led to uh, me being at the foundation and doing the work that I do now. But I'm sure we'll probably talk about that a little bit later too.
I just love your openness and vulnerability and how articulate and the insight you have into stuff. So thank you for that. I think one of the things your story illustrates so well is a lot of people that we get that come out of pretty good homes and pretty good upbringings go, I don't think I have complex trauma. I don't understand it. And very much similar to you. And your story just says it just takes one kid to comment on your weight and put that thought in your head to start making you feel you're not good enough, to start making you body conscious, food conscious, that can start you down a path that then gets added to by other comments that you purposely hear. And before you know it, you're so far down the path that it's really taken its toll on you. And so that bullying, just verbal comments that, you're too big, you don't fit kind of the standards of society around a girl's body, etc. I think we're through the understanding of complex trauma, really beginning to understand the power of words, especially in children. And they may seem innocent. It might be just what kids do, but in certain sensitive children that are people pleasers, etc., it lodges in their brain, and then they get fixated on it, and it does a whole lot of stuff. So I think just your story is such a powerful reminder to people that complex trauma doesn't mean you grew up in a family of violence and extreme abuse. It can be in this very subtle one comment from a kid that all of a sudden everything changed. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think when I started the course, and that was very much my thought was, well, I have good parents, I had a good childhood, there's nothing there. And you do quickly realize that these subtle things that not necessarily you think much of, even though I know like it had a huge impact on the way I viewed myself. But I was like, oh, well, you know, other people have it way worse than I did. They have abusive parents. They were sexually abused. They had parents who were incarcerated. Like there's so many other things. Maybe their dad's in the military. They grew up in a broken home. Their parents are divorced. There was all this laundry list of things, and I think I still struggle with that sometimes, to realize, well, what good is your story? Like there's nothing really to it. But I think just through the work that I've done, and recognizing that everybody has experienced things in life, and it was actually through a conversation with you that I think you kind of helped me reframe my thinking around it, because I think I had asked you, how do I help people in this line of work and relate to people who have been trafficked, who have experienced extreme forms of sexual abuse and trauma. How can I help them? Because I haven't experienced that. And I kind of felt like a little bit of a fraud, not, just having experienced that. I'm like, what do I have to offer someone? And how and you can kind of chime in on this, but how I remember taking the conversation was, we've all experienced different things in life. We've all had different upbringings. We've all had different childhoods. But the one connecting piece that we all have is we all share the same emotions. So we all know what it feels like to be scared. We all know what it feels like to be angry, to feel shamed. And so that's the connecting piece. That's what we all have in common. So even though they've come from different life experiences, we all know what that feels like.
Yeah. And if I can just add a piece to that, that to me just flows out of your story so well. Like, I think anybody listening to your story would realize that if this boyfriend of yours was a human trafficker, you would have been vulnerable to being humanly trafficked.
Absolutely.
Because of the bullying and the shame that came out of that in your own life, that I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Anybody that love bombed you, anybody that seemed to meet all your needs, this knight in shining armor, you were vulnerable to. And you now wanted to, this is my best chance to get love. I'm going to please them. I'm going to do whatever is necessary. I'm going to just stick at it, trying to make this work because it might be my only chance. Even though anybody else looking at it objectively is saying, Katelyn, what are you doing? In your mind, it's all making sense. And so it's realizing that just through your bullying experience, you ended up with the shame codependency mix that made you vulnerable to be humanly trafficked. So now when you meet other women that are humanly trafficked, you go, yeah, I understand that shame. I understand that codependency, wanting to please people. I've been there. I just
Yes.
thankfully wasn't trafficked, though I could have been. I would have fallen prey to it. So I get that core underneath stuff that makes a person vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was actually interesting because I had been working in this field for probably 2 years until that thought clicked in my head. And it was actually a friend and a colleague of mine, Nicole, that brought it up and said, Katelyn, like, do you not realize that everything that he did to you is exactly what a trafficker will do to their victim? And in that moment, it was like a light bulb had just gone off. I was like, oh my gosh, I had never thought of it in that way before. But you're right. He did everything. He came in, he told me everything I wanted to hear. He treated me in ways that I had always wanted to be treated. He took care of my needs. He gave me that sense of belonging, that love, that validation. And it was just the slow switch that happened. It wasn't that overnight, like, oh, that something's different from day one to day two. It was so gradual and subtle over time that you don't actually really realize anything is happening until you look back and realize, okay, things are really different now. Even though I was never trafficked, everything that he did was the same that maybe your trafficker did. It was just a whole new understanding for me, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about sharing that story of my life, because I think when it comes to human trafficking, there's a lot of misconceptions around what it is and what it looks like. And so just for me, like, my grandmother, my entire life has been fighting against human trafficking. I have not known a day where human trafficking wasn't something that was discussed at the dinner table. It was my norm. I knew that this was a thing. I knew what it looked like at a time where, The other kids in my class were like, human trafficking, what is that? It was not a conversation that was happening. So I knew all of these things. I grew up around it. And yet, exactly like you said, if this person had the intentions of trafficking me, I probably would have been swept into that because he had broken me down the exact same way that traffickers will break their victims down as well.
Exactly. And I think, to me, what's one of the misconceptions that many have is that those that are drawn into it come out of just terrible childhoods and they're just desperate, tough, rough girls that get into drugs and then they get trafficked because of that. And it's realizing, no, they often prey on girls from wonderful homes, but who have shame issues, who want to belong, are longing for love, and they prey on that. So let's move into the human trafficking. Just start us with some of the statistics just in Canada and US, the world, about the problem of human trafficking and how bad it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of statistics, to be honest, they are very hard to come by and probably not incredibly accurate just because this is a very underreported crime. And that can be for a lot of reasons. I would probably say some of the biggest are fear and shame, not feeling like they're going to be believed. They're scared that when they get out, they're going to be found. So oftentimes these things don't go reported to the police. So stats can be tricky. But for some of the ones that we do know, and I will say are very much represented in the cases and the work that we see and have done, we see these to be true and accurate as well. But again, we don't know everything to be certain. So I'll just start with that by saying stats can be really tricky. What we do know is that human trafficking, it's happening here in Canada and it's happening to our own citizens. Individuals who are trafficked here in Canada, over 90% of them are born here in Canada. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is this is something where people are coming here from third world countries and they're being trafficked, right? You see the movies and the depictions of maybe people coming over in boats or, trafficked in the back of semi-trailers. And although that stuff does happen, it's over 90% of people who are trafficked in Canada are born in Canada. The average age that we see this happening to is 13 years old, which is quite startling when you think of what a 13-year-old actually looks like. We've had cases much older and we've had cases much younger. So it's hard because we don't want people just to think, oh, well, I'm in my 20s, so I'm good. I'm not 13. We've had people trafficked by their husbands in their 50s and 60s, and we have had really young, vulnerable kids be trafficked. So it's a spectrum. Human trafficking is frankly not something that discriminates in terms of age, race, demographic, in terms of economic background, what your family was like you said. It can really, truly happen to anybody. And I think that's kind of one of the things we try and really discuss is that a victim, a survivor, and I'll say victim and survivor because some people like to be referred to as a survivor, some people prefer a victim, but these individuals, they don't look, and I say that very loosely, look the way that I think a lot of people think they might look like. They do, like you said, come from good homes. They do have good family, good upbringings. Sometimes, absolutely, they didn't grow up with good parents. They grew up in the foster care system. But it doesn't just happen to individuals who have grown up without that family support around them. The reason for that being is we all have vulnerabilities. We all have things about us that make us susceptible. For me, it was that longing and that need, that desire to feel loved and to feel validated. And And as soon as someone came in and was showing me that love and validation, I latched on. And that's often the case with a lot of trafficking here in Canada, is most often people are trafficked by somebody that they know. It's a boyfriend, it's a girlfriend. We see a lot of those cases happening where it's kind of that Romeo effect. It's the same thing that happened. It's they come in, they fill that void, they tell you everything you've ever wanted to hear. They will provide things like gifts and jewelry, maybe go on trips, take vacations together, just to really be that person that you can count on. And then slowly over time, that's when the switch happens. The biggest stat I would say that we like to really talk about and come back to is that within 1 kilometer from where you are sitting right now, anywhere in this country, someone is being lured into human trafficking at any minute. And people say, well, how can that be? Like, especially if maybe they're in rural Canada somewhere, right? It's because of technology. It's because of our phones. We're all online. And that's where a lot of this is going on right now as well, is it's shifted. People are luring and grooming people over the internet. And so if you have a phone, if you have access to the internet, it's happening. It's there. And so yeah, it's very real. It's kind of one of those things where I think people think it's not really that big of an issue. They don't really realize it's happening, but it's, in my opinion, it's kind of hidden in plain sight. It doesn't look like what people expect it to look like, but it's happening all around us. And so that's why the education portion of learning about this issue and talking about it, raising awareness, is so important, because it's very preventable if you know what to look out for.
So just before we go into the preventable and the warning signs, if we were to go to like the RCMP, Canada's National Police Force, what would they say as far as documented numbers of human trafficking that they stop, that they are aware of? Like, just how big of a number would they give?
You know, I would honestly say it's probably a lot lower than what we are seeing. And I say that because a lot of the cases that we have dealt with have never gone in front of police. The police don't even know that this was a thing. So I don't know if they would necessarily have a number, but I do know that because of the underreporting of it, it's an issue, and it kind of perpetuates the issue with people not realizing that it's as big as it is, because there aren't proper stats around it.
So just anecdotally, like we live right next to the US border in Windsor on the 401, which is Canada's main highway, interstate outside of the Trans-Canada. And so it's become known as kind of the human trafficking main chunk of highway. And from the research that I've done with people that know, it's like there's not one hotel between Toronto and us, which is over 3 hours, that isn't used at some point for moving human trafficking cargo. So it is a major issue that's happening, that, again, hidden in plain sight, because people are staying in hotels. They go in as a couple and pass under the radar, and then they're shuttled off down across the border. So let's move to just, if you're working with high school students, middle school students, what are you letting them know as the things that they should be looking for as danger signs?
So when we talk about being able to recognize those signs, we always talk about focus on yourself and your circle of influence. I think a lot of people, good meaning people, will try and go out and maybe spot the signs of human trafficking in complete strangers. And where that becomes dangerous is, are we profiling people? So we always make sure to say, when you're looking for these things, really focus on the people who are in your circle of influence, your friends, your family, your community, the people that you know well are the ones that you're going to be able to kind of spot things shifting in. So yeah, when it comes to when we're going into schools and talking with students about what does this look like and how does it happen? Some of the biggest things we say and we talk about with students is, how does it work? So, they will come in and they're these nice, kind, doting people. They're not this scary man in a white van that you're kind of stranger danger told about when you're young to be worried about. It doesn't look like that. These are people who are upstanding citizens who, I mean, there of course is gang involvement and organized crime, but they don't always look, these predators don't always look the way we would think or expect them to look like. Because I think for most, and this is one of the big things we always get asked is, well, why don't people just leave? And I think for most, you think about, okay, well, how does a relationship start? It usually doesn't start with abuse, right? So there has been that time where the respect, the trust, the love has been built. So you have to think about it as this isn't somebody that's going to come up to you and try to make you feel uncomfortable or feel scared or worried that you should have worry about who this person is, right? This is going to be someone who comes across as very kind, very trustworthy, very responsible. And so it's not something to be like, oh, well, you should really be paying attention to every person that comes into your life. Of course, not everybody has bad intentions, but we just try and have them realize that this isn't that kind of scary person, maybe that homeless person on the street that your parents told you to worry about. So it really could be anyone, and they're businessmen. They have good jobs, they have families, they have money, that they're people in our community. Sometimes they're people who have positions of authority or trust over us, whether that be a teacher, whether that be a coach, whether that be a doctor, whether that be a restaurant owner. It really could be anybody. And so when it comes time to talking about, okay, so what do we look for in somebody, in our friends who's maybe being groomed or lured into human trafficking? So some of the things we can look out for is a new person in their life. Often, again, this is someone who we wouldn't necessarily suspect anything is wrong with them. But if there's somebody new in their life, maybe they're starting to take a bigger interest in this person. They're starting to spend a lot more time with this person to the point where it's starting to change their attitudes and behaviors towards things that normally they were interested in, whether that be school, whether that be sports. This person is maybe taking a lot more of their time, or they're just wanting to hang out with this person a whole lot. So somebody who was always at the soccer field after school is now starting to kind of retreat back away from that and not show interest in those things anymore. That can be one of the things, if that change of interest starts to shift. Grades, if your grades are dropping, that's another one of those things where it's maybe a sign that your attention is kind of being pulled elsewhere. Physical injuries are definitely something that we see, as well as tattoos or branding. Sometimes traffickers will quite literally tattoo their victims as almost a sign of ownership over that person. They belong to this trafficker now. One of the biggest things that we share with kids is 2 cell phones. Traffickers will give their victims a second phone, especially if they're younger, because I think most kids nowadays have a cell phone, but their parents are the ones providing that cell phone. So, maybe that phone is being taken away at the end of the night, or maybe they don't always have privileges for their phone. So the trafficker will give them a second phone so that they can always keep track of them, their whereabouts, get in touch with them when they need them. Traffickers will also provide gifts. So if maybe your friend is always showing up to school with new clothing, or maybe they're talking about a trip that they went on, or something like that, without the means to really be able to provide those things for themselves, as well as shifts in makeup or the way that they dress even. These are all things that traffickers will kind of use and utilize. They'll give their victims these things to build that trust, to build that relationship, to make them think like, oh wow, I'm being taken care of so well. It's everything that I've ever wanted. And then things will slowly start to shift. And that's sometimes where you can start to maybe see the abuse, physical bruising or cuts. But yeah, those are some of the biggest things that we talk about with kids when they're maybe looking to their friends or their siblings on what to look out for.
Thank you so far, Katelyn. And it's interesting some of the things that you're saying. We interviewed Alicia a few months ago, and so just seeing kind of how her personal story is reflected in a lot of what you're sharing. I was wondering, we've been talking about the warning signs. How do you support somebody who has been a victim of trafficking? Like, how does that support like begin to look like, and how do you walk alongside them in their own healing journey?
I think the biggest thing is to recognize that this isn't something that somebody wants to happen. They didn't start this relationship with this person thinking that they were going to be trafficked, right? No one wants to be abused and mistreated. So I think recognizing that this wasn't their fault. I know a lot of individuals who have been trafficked feel like they did something wrong to either deserve what had happened to them, or they put themselves, like if they just hadn't gone to this, nightclub, if they just hadn't reached out to this person, maybe it wouldn't have happened to them. There's a lot of blame that is placed on victims who have been trafficked. And I think it's really important when we are helping individuals to realize what happened to them was a crime. They were taken advantage of, they were abused, and it isn't their fault. They didn't want this, they didn't ask for it. So to put any sort of blame or shame on somebody who has been through something like this is really horrible. And so, being just that safe person that they can come to and feel safe enough to share with is so important, because oftentimes there is rhetoric around, if you just weren't wearing this, or if you hadn't been doing this, like, were you asking for it, right? It's really harmful when we're talking about these situations where, like, traffickers know what they are doing. They are so skilled at manipulating individuals into doing what they want them to do. So it's not their fault. Being there to listen openly and candidly and kind of be that safe place for them to land. I think a lot of times people who have been trafficked don't feel like they will be believed, because that too, sometimes if they have come forward at some point, whether it to be to report to police, whether it be to share with their family. I know so many individuals, even to this day, whose family don't actually believe that this is something that has happened to them, or it wasn't as severe as they were saying. So in terms of supporting somebody, I think it's really important that not only are we listening and offering that safe space for them, but also trying to understand and even asking them, like, how can I help you right now? What do you need? And sometimes that can be a really overwhelming question for them, because they don't always know what they need. If they have been in for a very long time, or even a short amount of time, but they're so used to being told what to do and when to do it, their needs have never been a thought or a consideration, so they don't know what they need. So sometimes it's even just helping them figure out, what do you like to eat? You know, if we have a meeting and we've had people in and, what do you want? You go to Tim Hortons, what do you want from Tim's? They don't know because the only thing that they have eaten up until this point was what they could afford or what their trafficker would give them enough money for. So if it was $5, they know that, okay, well, they can afford a bagel with maybe butter, not cream cheese, and a coffee. And what do they get in their coffee? Well, they don't even know. Sometimes it's black. It's whatever they can afford. They don't even know if they like cream cheese because they couldn't afford it. Traffickers will keep their money and not give it to their victims. So sometimes that question of what can I help you with right now? What do you need? They don't even know. So just being there to help them kind of navigate that process afterwards, be that listening ear, I think is the biggest thing, truthfully, that you can do for somebody. Telling them that you believe them, because this is very real. I can't tell you how many people who have come through our offices when we just, sit down with them and they tell you some of their story, and they'll say, oh, I know it sounds crazy or whatever else. And we tell them, no, we believe you. And the instant release that you can see physically in their body. And so many of them have told us, no one's ever told me that they believe me. It can do so much to help somebody, and just feeling like they can be comfortable enough to share with you what happened.
That non-judgmental attitude and the support can be so important. With your own background in psychology and what you've learned, why do you think, what's the educational component that can happen for the public? Why do we think that so many people, like, we do the blame the victim mentality, or we do the minimization? Like, why? I don't know. Have you looked into that at all, or have an idea of why that exists and maybe how we can educate people better?
I think, and this is just from maybe what I have seen and heard and experienced, I think of a lot of it comes down to ignorance. People just don't understand, and whether it's they are trying to just stay in their little bubble and they don't want to understand, because that's actually something I've heard quite often is, oh, this is too dark, this is too much. I can't listen to this presentation. We have so many people that say that. So whether it's that or whether it's just never been exposed to this issue before, I think it really just stems down to people don't know what they don't know. And so when you don't know what's going on around you, you're not going to know how to support somebody. You're not going to know the right questions to ask. You're not going to know where to look to find these things out. So that's why I think when it comes to education, this is such a preventable thing if you know what it is and what to look out for, that I really encourage people to, even though it's a dark subject, even though it can be very scary, it doesn't have to be. If you approach it in a way of, this could maybe help me or my loved ones or my family, right? You're doing yourself and your family a favor by learning and by educating on this issue, and by also sharing it with other people that I think from the time that the foundation started back in 2011 and until now, there has been a lot of work and growth, I think, just in general within society, towards people being more open to having this discussion and to hearing and learning. But there's still a really long way we have to go. And so it's not a scary thing if you are approaching it from the standpoint of, what can I learn to help somebody in my life? Yes, it is a very, very challenging subject to approach. When you start hearing the stories and realizing just how real it is, it can be really dark and it can be really deep, especially when you start going to that place of, if you know somebody who has been trafficked. And I think that's the other side of the coin, where if you do know somebody who has been impacted by this crime, people will also shy away from learning about it because they can't go there in their mind and in understanding what this person has gone through, because they're worried about feeling shame and blame, and oh, if only I could have prevented it. If this is a spouse that they have, and just loving their spouse, like, it's hard to imagine the trauma that somebody has gone through with this crime. But I think what we have to recognize is, if we don't have the education, if we don't have the knowledge, this isn't something that we are going to be able to stop or prevent from happening. And it's far, far easier to prevent it from happening in the first place than to try and help somebody who has already been through it, because they have so much that they have been through. There is so much hurt, there is so much trauma that they have experienced over the years, that if we can raise awareness about this and help people understand what it is, we're just going to be helping our family, our friends, our community, and society as a whole.
Wonderfully said. And if I just loved what you said as far as supporting somebody who's a survivor. I just wanted to add a couple little pieces, and I think it's very much part of your world as well. But like, to me, you just described that it's easier to prevent this than it is to help somebody that's been through it because of the trauma that they go through. And so when I work with somebody that's been through human trafficking, what I have to realize up front is that they're in the extreme end of the trauma spectrum based on what they've gone through. And it's not just one trauma or two. It's been daily living in constant fear, even stuff done that could have killed you, etc. So it takes its toll. And so what I want to do with clients from that is help them understand that everybody that I work through that's come out of human trafficking, it's a long journey. There's not a quick fix. You just don't get over it in a week, or you have to be patient with yourself and compassionate to yourself, that it takes a long time to come out of this hole. But secondly, you really have to do therapy at two levels. You got to work on all of the trauma that you experienced while you were human trafficked. And there's a lot of trauma to work through, and you need a skilled therapist to help you through that. But you also need to look at that deep down early life complex trauma, the shame that came out of bullying it or neglect, that you can begin to heal those deep core wounds that set you up to be groomed. And so you really got to work at both of those levels. But then I think it's so important for people to understand that somebody coming out of human trafficking with that much trauma is, they often live with paranoia for years. They're looking over their shoulder all the time, wondering if they're going to be found, wondering if the person's going to catch up with them and take them back again. Can you just talk a little bit about that element of reality for many of the survivors?
Yes, it is. It is a very real thing, and something that we see for me personally. I don't think I have had one case where, especially when they have just recently gotten away, where that isn't part of the narrative. I'm scared that they're going to find me. I'm scared that they're going to hurt my family. I think what is important to realize is that the manipulation and the threats have been so severe regardless of how long they've been trafficked. I know so many individuals whose families have been threatened. So it's not only just fear for themselves or what their trafficker is capable of doing, but it's fear for their loved ones. They will threaten their families. I mean, even something like a pet, right? They will find those things that you love and you care about, and they will use that against you to put that fear and that intimidation into you. And it's truly like there has been a mental prison that has been placed around somebody's mind to the point of, yeah, when they consider leaving, they're fearful and they're scared that they're going to be found, that something is going to be done to them or their family. Because not only is it that verbal threat, but sometimes traffickers will go ahead and physically show abuse. I've had individuals where their families' homes have been tagged by their traffickers, even after they've gone out, almost as a sign of like, I know where your family lives. I'm watching you. I can get to you. And, I think so it's so deep and it's very real, right? You don't always know what these people are capable of. But when you have seen them go through with physical threats, violence towards you or towards other people, you're so worried about taking care of yourself and the people that are around you that you are willing to do anything to protect those people. And that's oftentimes why people who have maybe gotten out will actually go back because they don't want anything to happen to them or to their loved ones. There's also this dependency that has grown on to this individual where they're taking care of your needs, whether that be a physical roof, clothing, food, drugs, or alcohol. You become dependent on this person. So leaving becomes incredibly challenging. And that's why when people kind of ask, why don't people leave? It's because there is so many reasons why they can't or they don't want to. And also, one of the biggest things too with all of this is, again, how did that relationship start out? Well, it started really well. So if you have love or ties to this person, you also fear losing them. Even when they're your abuser, you're still scared to lose that person in your life.
Yeah, so there's that toxic attachment that's formed early on that's really hard to shake. And I think really what you're emphasizing is leaving human trafficking is not simple as just one decision, I'm going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
It's then followed by 1,000 difficult decisions that
Mm-hmm.
are full of fear, that are full of conditioning, that you have to overcome one obstacle after another,
Mm-hmm.
both internal and external. And it's just like more and more bars on this prison that have been added over the years that make it so difficult. So if somebody was to have gone to you kind of in high school where you're longing to be loved and validated and have kind of that deep shame that came out of the bullying around your weight and all of that, and you meet this guy and he's just love bombing you, telling you what you want to hear, being there for you. If somebody was to come to you at that point and say, Katelyn, I think you got a bad one here. So they're trying to warn you that they see warning signs that you don't see. You see this is you've just struck gold and found Romeo. So I think that's what a lot of families see, some of the warning signs, but their teenage daughter isn't listening. So have you learned any kind of things that can help get through to somebody that's got the rose-colored glasses on because they are finally getting the love they've always longed for?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you can do?
Yeah, it can be really tough because I think, looking back too for myself, like if someone had come and said, I'm a little bit worried, I don't know that I would have kind of given them the time of day. Like you said, you have those rose-colored glasses on and this is somebody that you love, but when it comes down to it, I've definitely had parents come to me and kind of ask that same question, like my daughter is being really defiant and she is not listening to the things that we are telling her and we are worried and we don't know what to do. So we kind of start to have a bit of a discussion, but one of the things I try to understand and try to talk to parents about is just how you are approaching the situation. How are you talking to your daughter about, or your kid, your son, about the situation? Are you approaching it with anger and with discouragement and disappointment? Or are you approaching the conversation from a place of love and no judgment and compassion and understanding? Because I think sometimes when you're put in those positions, it's really scary. Like, as a parent, to see these red flags happening within your kids and feeling like you have no control over the situation. You almost want to shift to the complete opposite end and kind of come down on them and be that, well, this is just how it is kind of parent, to try and gain some control over the situation. But it actually really most often does quite the opposite, and it'll push the child away even more. So I think it's really important to, and this can be really hard, but kind of self-reflect a little bit in how you are being and approaching the situation. I mean, it's not easy to do, and I can be the first to say that it's really hard when you recognize there are patterns in your own life that you're maybe not so proud of how you handled a situation, but it's really important that we aren't approaching this with a lot of heat, with a lot of anger, and just coming with that really compassionate place and understanding, because at the end of the day, you have to be that soft place to land for your kid, right? Every child is going to make mistakes. Every kid is going to have bad relationships. I mean, we hope and pray that that's not the case, but I think oftentimes we don't really quite understand what our parents are talking about until we've gone through it. And so that can be really hard. But what I always knew for myself is that when I wasn't feeling well, when things weren't going my way, and when I was really struggling, I always had somewhere to fall back on. So even if I had gotten into trouble, or if my ex was, making me cry or have a panic attack or whatever it was at the time, I knew that I still had my parents who were going to love me and support me no matter what. And I think that's really important for kids to know, and for parents to just reiterate to their kids, is I'm going to love you no matter what. I know that right now maybe you are looking at this person with rose-colored glasses, and maybe we don't necessarily see eye to eye on this situation, but I'm telling you these things and I'm talking to you about these things because I'm worried, and because I do know that this is something that could be happening, right? Having that conversation with kids about what is human trafficking and how it happens, and the fact that all of these things that your boyfriend is maybe doing to you, a lot of these are the warning signs that we actually know. So could something more be going on here? The other thing I think would be important to incorporate in the conversation, and I think for me probably would have really helped get me out of the rose-colored glasses, was, how does this person make you feel? Because I think when you're in the thick of it, you're not really thinking about how you feel. You're just in survival mode. You're just trying to keep this person happy. You're trying not to rock the boat. You know that you don't feel good, but you're not stopping to think about how you're feeling. So how does this person make you feel? I think starting to open up that conversation and just approach it with vulnerability too as a parent, because I think kids pick up on that. They can see and they can sense when a parent is coming at them just as kind of that aggressive parent, or if they're coming as a soft, kind, compassionate, like, let's have a conversation. And you just want to, you want to do everything you possibly can to protect your child. And I can't imagine, I don't have kids, but I can't imagine when I do have kids, how hard it's going to be for me to send them out into the world and to see them get hurt. I can only imagine what that is like. But I think we have to try our very best not to go into like protection, like this is how it is, get angry, try to scare them mode. We have to be that safe place for them to land.
I was wondering if maybe you would be able to share a story anonymously or broadly that illustrates how hope and healing are possible coming out of trafficking.
Yeah. It's so important because I think, like we talked about earlier, this is a very dark subject and something that people are scared to talk about. But in realizing that there are a lot of success stories, there are a lot of people that get through it and are thriving afterwards. There is a lot of hope and a lot of healing that can come to this. And this isn't like a death sentence. I've heard that term used before. Like there's never coming back from this. And one of the things we try and work through with survivors is just because this is something that has happened to you does not define you. This is not who you are. And it's actually really beautiful to see that shift that people start to make when they realize that they are so much more than this experience that they have been through, this trauma that they have had happen to them. And so, in terms of a story, I mean, I could give you so many, but I personally know so many individuals who had been trafficked. But once they go through that healing journey, I mean, they're not stuck there, right? I think that's if someone is maybe listening to this and they've been trafficked or they're still in that healing journey and they feel so stuck, there is a way out. Like there is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I know so many individuals who have gotten out and they're now married. They are working full-time jobs. They have beautiful relationships. They have regained relationships with their kids or even custody back over their kids. They have won court battles and cases against their abusers and received justice that way. There's so many things that life still has to offer. And I just really want to encourage people that if you're maybe in that place where you don't know what is the next step forward, just know that life does get better. It will move past this point of feeling hopeless and just not to give up because I mean, I know so many people. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with so many people who have gotten past that place of hopelessness. And so I know it may not mean a whole lot coming from me, but I've worked with a lot of people and I know that it is possible to get there.
It's a really beautiful message to end on here. And I was wondering if you could share where can listeners learn more or get involved, and are there any upcoming initiatives or projects that the foundation is working on that you'd like to highlight for us?
Yeah, so in terms of education and learning more, I think our website would be a really great place to start, thejoysmithfoundation.com. There's lots of resources on there in terms of handouts and just more education that you can get right then and there from the website. As well as we do lots of presentations and work with individuals, corporations, schools, healthcare, really anyone who is looking and wanting more education, maybe to train their employees on what this is and how it happens. So you can reach out and book a presentation if that's something you're wanting to delve a little bit more into. We also have an event every year that is called Joy in Action. It happens locally in Manitoba, but we also have individuals who do it across the country. And essentially, it's just a week where people kind of come together and they'll organize maybe a little bit of an event. So, whether that's a walk or a run, some people have done bake sales, some people have even just done it at family gatherings or neighborhood gatherings. And just it's a way for people to come together and start talking about the issue and raising awareness about it. So that happens every fall. And so that's something that you could also learn more about on the foundation website. The other thing that I will say in terms of just education around this topic is we've also started a podcast ourselves. It's called Luma and Bloom. And the reasoning behind starting that podcast, and we had Tim come on our podcast, so he has a few episodes with us as well, but we wanted to help bring awareness to the fact that human trafficking is an issue that can affect anybody. Like we had talked about earlier, there's a lot of misconceptions, and unless you've been touched by human trafficking, whether it's somebody that you know or maybe it's just something you're really passionate about, not a lot of people are talking about it. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that this can happen to really anybody. So we wanted to start having conversations around it and have it be something that is a little bit more approachable to the general public. So we have all sorts of conversations on our podcast around different topics. We talked with trauma and what that is with Tim. We have had people come on and talk about their own stories. We've had a mother of a victim who came on and shared her story. We have had other individuals just share their personal testimonies, but we also have a lot of conversations around other topics like mental health, like suicide, and just body image, different things that can make somebody vulnerable or susceptible to something like this happening, and just have some really interesting guests on. I think it's pretty far reaching and probably not a lot of the people that you would necessarily expect to come on. We have had military people come on and talk about their life and their work and their experience, but trauma. We've had relationship conversations. So there's honestly something there for everybody. It's a really great way to be able to share stories, and very similar to what you guys are doing with your podcast, just have a connecting piece for people to realize that we're all connected one way or another, right? Just because we've all experienced different things doesn't mean that we can't hold compassion and space for everyone. By sharing stories, I think it helps people to connect to other people as well. So the podcast also has a website, and we're on social media, so you could have a listen to that just to learn a little bit more about the issue and different subject areas that intersect with the issue.
Thanks for sharing all of that. Katelyn and Tim, thank you both. And to everyone listening, I think some of the takeaways are that human trafficking is happening here. It's happening nearby and in our communities. And that awareness, education, and compassionate action can help to change lives. So we're honored that you spent this time with us. And as Katelyn reminded us, that healing is possible and life can get better.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.